Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, your host of the Grid Mod Pod and Vice President of Technical Strategy at AEIC. On today's episode, I discuss how utilities can turn fragmented contractor compliance processes into scalable operational solutions with AJ Hester of Southern Company and Chris Stockton of Veriforce. This issue is important because some of the most meaningful modernization work happening across the utility industry is not always the most visible. Often it is the foundational work behind the scenes that improves safety, reduces downtime, strengthens consistency, and helps operations run more smoothly at scale. Contractor readiness during generation outages is one of those areas. When compliance is manual and fragmented, it creates delays, confusions, and hidden inefficiencies that affect the entire organization. So WorkerPass shows what is possible when utilities and partners work together to simplify the process, create better visibility, and build a solution that supports both frontline execution and enterprise performance. In this episode, you'll hear all about it. We hope you walk away from this podcast with insights and momentum needed to spark change in our industry. Welcome to the podcast. I look forward to hearing about your guys' journey and your perspective and educating our audience. So take time to introduce yourselves.
Hey, Liz. My name is AJ Hester, and I work with Southern Company. Been with the company for 20 years now. And I'll pass it over to my trusted friend and partner, Chris Stockton.
Hey, Liz. Chris Stockton. I'm with Veriforce. We specialize in contractor and worker risk management and credentialing and compliance.
I love that word, compliance. We're highlighting a series of these projects, and I don't know if it was something to do with 2025, but really understanding how technology can be to service to the people and the processes, especially in the world of compliance, is of the utmost importance. And I think it's something that maybe isn't flashy and likes to be discussed. So I look forward to kind of peeling back that onion and thinking through, what were your paths, your experience, your perspectives that really pulled you into this project and really what that journey was. So AJ, from the utilities perspective, where's your space within the utility and kind of how did this project come to be?
Sure. I have what I call a unique background with Southern Company. I started out in the line crews out in the field and then progressed through different roles and responsibilities, leading teams across the organization and with multi-opco experience, both in power delivery and generation. And when I got into the generation space, that is where this project, I guess, was born at. And that was over at Southern Power, one of the subsidiaries of Southern Company.
So, let's just start at the beginning. What was kind of the original problem statement? Where did it kind of percolate from? And, what was maybe the breakdown or the obstacle that really kind of triggered this partnership that you and Chris have created and really the product that you all created for the industry and your company?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to talk about it. Most of my experience has been in the power delivery space. So when I transitioned over to the generation space, had a fresh perspective on how things were done because I've never been exposed to that part of the business. So during one of my first outages, Southern Company has a large generating fleet. And in that generation fleet, to maintain reliability, we have to take outages on a certain frequency. And that requires a lot of outside resources to come in and help us maintain and repair or install equipment. And during that process, there's a lot of, again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of people that show up to perform the work, and there's certain requirements that have to be met to gain access, physical access to our facilities, whether it be a drug test or background check, any of those things. So when I first got to Southern Power, I got to notice, and there was a huge backlog of people at the entry gate trying to get in to perform work. And as you start diving into that and seeing, why can't we get people on site to perform work? And it boils down to not meeting those site requirements to gain access. It could be an expired drug test, a missing drug test, or a missing or expired background check. So we start really looking at that to see how can we get better. One of our mantras here at Southern Company is continuous improvement. That is one of the pillars and foundations that which we always try to improve upon is continuous improvement. How do we get better? And with that, we wanted to try to leverage technology in that space to help us get better, right? Get people to be pre-compliant before arriving at the show to perform work or to perform a task.
So just for our listeners, I think a big space, and especially like I was in the, supporting the utilities from, gathering data, building models, running studies. And it wasn't until you're actually experiencing kind of what you're talking about. When I came into the utility and, there was a nuclear facility that we, maintained the infrastructure inside that substation yard. So just like for those that have never experienced it, the amount of compliance and really regulation and the standards that are required to allow an individual just on site, and you kind of alluded to it, is large and important. And if you step in the wrong direction, it can really then cause an enormous amount of afterthought and logging and reporting to really, self-report and justify, maybe if there was a mishap. So what you're kind of alluding to is the original obstacle, especially as you transition from the T&D, like the lines side crews, into this generation space. You saw this really downtime that could be effectively on the equipment, really behind the gate trying to get through. So you really thought, okay, how can we use technology to our advantage? Not flashy, but incredibly important. So I guess, thinking about, and you said it, continuous improvement, which is kind of the bread and butter of operational excellence. That E is not finished in that nuclear space. You're always evolving. So, that's kind of what you're bringing to the table here today. And I like to just pull modernization out of the abstract and just bring attention to, thought leaders and these fundamental obstacles that may get buried in the grandiose of our transformation, that this is where the core change champions, can really thrive. So thinking about that, kind of how did it start, knowing your position, your problem, like what were the different groups and people that you had to bring along on this journey? And like, what were those obstacles?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Liz. And I do want to call out that our current process at the time was very manual and very fragmented. Right. So I definitely want to capture that where, a portion of each part of the process lived with a different group or a different person. Right. So really, how do we get people into the gate to perform work because we're not producing a product, right? We got downtime there, but also where can we get better internally as well and really streamline and create some operational efficiencies in our internally to Southern Company also. And as we looked at that, we went to leadership. I think it's very important to call out. I want to miss that piece around how our leadership here at Southern Company really empowers their people, right? And they believe in their people. So early on, we got leadership on board with an idea or a concept of what we thought good looked like, if you will. And of course, after having some conversations and thinking about different scenarios, our leadership supported us, basically endorsed the project. We're going out and finding a solution to the problem and a way to get better. And through some internal vetting processes, we landed with Veriforce to help us solve some of those problems.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, the real thesis of the entire conversation came about from having workers show up on site ready to work, and then doing so in a way that centralized the knowledge. So instead of many disparate systems having centralized knowledge sharing across the different groups that were impacted by this, and then really having the trail, the record to justify that and what was done. So while there's a big technology component of it, the technology really is just bridging the gap between the people and the process. And what we work together to do is put together the technology, the people, the process to facilitate having people being able to arrive on site, ready to work, fully prepped, and having visibility up front into what those requirements were before they showed up and where there may be gaps or lapses. So as opposed to the line at the gate saying, what do you mean I don't have my orientation completed or whatever it may be, they had all that at their fingertips in advance of showing up on site. And ultimately that allowed them to complete that in advance. When we talk about reducing cost and providing more power going forward, it all comes down to efficiency. So the efficiencies we've gained through this process have been tremendous.
I mean, just for our listeners, when you say efficiencies gains, I think another area, unless you're in it, in the corporate, metric KPI space, like they do matter because like you need to be able to justify the cost, not only just resources of dollars, but resources of human energy of making that type of gain in efficiencies. So when you say you gain efficiency, was it as simple as we used to have X number of stops at the gate versus a certain percentage has been mitigated? Something as simple as that? Or what was your I don't need specific percentages here, but that's what you're talking about to our listeners is cutting down that downtime. Period. The end.
I'll comment first. I mean, at the end of the day, the product is power. And when you're in an outage for maintenance or otherwise, you're not producing product. So any potential for delay or any potential for wait is expense to the company, not only in product, but also in labor. And then second to that is you're paying for contracted labor. And if those laborers are waiting on site for clearance and standing around, you're paying them to do just that as opposed to work. And AJ, I'll let you comment further, having seen a lot of the efficiencies firsthand.
Sure, and that was the part around craft labor showing up essentially in the past model of not ready to work, not showing up at the gate, coming through and getting started. But that was a huge efficiency, right? And now that people show up, they become pre-compliant. They see them and their contract administrators may see well before they get there what is expired or what needs to be satisfied as a compliance requirement. And then they show up to the gate, they get in, get on their tools. The other thing is we've identified, as I believe as Chris mentioned earlier, the other disparate systems that we have, technology systems, right? Some are old, outdated. Some don't perform that well and haven't made changes with technology or, the evolution haven't followed that pathway there. So there's opportunity for reduction in technical debt as well. So, I mean, you're seeing at the frontline levels all the way up to, as you mentioned, Liz, the corporate levels where we see things and we trend KPIs and matrices.
Okay. And so I just have to say, only I can get excited about this, but to our listeners, we typically, we don't do a run through of the show. I believe, the more these conversations are occurring and the awareness of the commonalities and the themes are pronounced and available to the external folk, as well as really our internal utility voices, of some of the key nuggets and principles to really unlock advanced technologies and our data efforts, the better off we'll all be. So you guys hit on all four in the last little discussion we have, the idea that this advanced technology or just even new technology with the partnership of Veriforce, of understanding the gaps, understanding the silos and disparate information is paramount. Then having your executive leadership aligned and empowering the individuals that understand these obstacles. And the other one is really the partnership between the utility need and voice and leadership and the vendor community, that whole ecosystem. Utilities are not here to create all of the new technologies. The utilities are here to be users of all of this advanced capabilities. And also just to ground us, the world worked the way it worked, as we stated, very manual, because it was the available tools at the time. And so we're in this fast-paced evolution of where we can extract data from multiple disparate data sets, we can cleanse the data, govern the data, and then rinse and repeat and deliver it into an application in the palms of our crews in a rapid form. And that's in essence what the WorkerPass became, but correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm just saying you guys hit all the themes. And so that's why it's empowering to me and why I want to share the project as a whole. And I was just thinking about the other theme is really that, okay, so you got the alignment from the leadership. You understand that this will single-handedly create efficiencies and processes that you once didn't have. What was the creation and then really the adoption of said tool for your journey? Could you speak to that? Really, like the change management or the ability to communicate effectively to the end users of, how this tool will be used and how it will empower them? Or was it easy and it wasn't really a discussion? Because that would be cool too.
I'll start, AJ, just by saying it was truly a partnership. Like AJ said, they came up with their opinion of what great would look like. And then from there, we looked at what priorities have the most impact fastest. And then we worked together across both of our organizations in a true partnership to deliver on those from the beginning. And that ultimately allows the base building block to be established to where it becomes really easy to add on to it in the future. Not a week goes by, AJ, and I don't find another area where this can be utilized in a different capacity to improve capacities across the entire business, not just power generation, but really driving that efficiency and value throughout the entire company. So it's been really,
Amen.
it's been really a true partnership working together, but establishing that baseline of trust and relationship and driving that value up front and demonstrating how that works.
Absolutely. And from Southern's perspective, we wanted a partner that we could trust, that gave great customer service, and whose tool was very configurable, right? Because different parts of the business have different needs. We don't need to go out and search for another software for another part of the business. We need a one-stop shop, if you will. And that's where we landed with Veriforce. Veriforce uses the crawl, walk, run mentality, if you will.
We
So
use the crawl, walk, run mentality.
yeah,
When we say we, GridMod
true.
enthusiast.
And that's a great way to, you talked about change management, how you roll it out throughout the organization. And that's really what we tried to adopt, right? Really the what are the bare minimum requirements? How do we not only let's adopt those first, and let's build off of that, as Chris mentioned, the building blocks. And then let's partner with our internal partners, internal stakeholders. Hey, how do we communicate this effectively? We go to our comms department. Y'all are experts in this space. We go to our supply chain partners. We go to our craft labor partners. What is the best way to communicate this? What are some obstacles, some opportunities that we have for continued improvement here? And just really those relationships, both internally and externally, and connecting those dots has really helped us execute this project throughout the organization. So if I was to tell you, if we had a master document and this is exactly how we do it, that we don't have that, because each part of the business operates a little bit differently. So, and the customer base is a little different. So it's basically relationships and communication and just partnering together and building up from there.
And why I'm smiling is, you're speaking my language, because I think, and maybe selfishly, one of the reasons for, AIC and creating the platform of utility voices, educating utility folk, and really having this podcast here is, it's the words that you just rattled off, communication, engagement, collaboration, to really do these types of transformational type projects. It requires leadership that's able to reach across the aisle across many different groups. So, I think maybe over the last 40 years plus in the utility space, we've been in this very regimented, this is how we do it, this is how our electrons flow, this is how our systems work, this is how we educate, inform, and train. And so now we're in this generational change where every dynamic piece of our power grid is effectively going through some kind of transformation, be it aged or the access to new technology. So we need these leaders, change champions like you, AJ and Chris, in our industry to really understand you can have the best idea with the best technology, with the solution right at our fingertips that we all can see. But if you don't have the skill set to communicate, to bring along folk, to break down the silos, right? I mean, that's where the true work lies. So you spoke right to it again. It's like we actually, wrote this out. So I guess, to anyone listening and understanding, this isn't really taught in our day-to-day academic career. And really, when you enter in the workforce as, a newbie, you're enthusiastic and you just want to make a change and want to make a difference. I mean, hopefully that's why people show up to the job. You don't really realize what you just spoke to is the actual work of said activity. So for everyone sitting in their chair, wishing a process could change or a tool could be created or an efficiency could be gained, it really will take, a labor of love to really champion those types of activities. So like for your peers, what's a sage advice? I know that you don't have a book written or a one pager, but like for you as personally in being a change champion within a utility or transforming a technology product with a utility leader to you, Chris, what's something you would share?
I have a unique perspective too that always that's near and dear to my heart, right? I grew up on my tools. So that's kind of where my mind always goes to first is the frontline worker, the one that's out there possibly fighting the elements like with this recent storm that we had come through, right? And so that's always where I build everything off of, I guess you would say, in our processes is how's this going to affect the end user, right? The boots on the ground people. How's that going to affect that? So I always keep that in the forefront of my mind. So it's very important if you don't have that experience to engage those people because there's no need. You mentioned the word silos the other day. We can sit in a silo and create things, but if we don't have a partnership with those frontline employees or have an understanding of how things work, then I don't know if we'll always be so successful, right? We have to engage those people. Be open-minded, if you will. Listen to people who are bringing things to you because maybe those people are probably living it day to day and they see some challenges and some opportunities to where they can get better, where they can improve. And maybe you are that person that's that possibly that barrier to that breakthrough. So just be open-minded and be welcoming and encouraging because we are in a landscape that is constantly changing. We see it on a daily basis. I mean, there's a large amount of growth happening and we have to be able to ebb and flow with the industry. So that's just one piece of advice. Just be open-minded and willing to understand.
Yeah, and I would build on that and say one thing I think AJ did very well and the teams together is it's a large, complex business and there's a lot of large, very complex problems. If you can identify what great looks like and you can prioritize what drives the most impact the fastest, that it's important to get started. I mean, too many aspects of our life, analysis paralysis, the best laid plans can get delayed and delayed because ultimately you try to make, you let perfect get in the way of good. And so by focusing on where we can really deliver that value and solve these core problems, we're off the ground. It's everything's successful and running, and it becomes that much easier to just say, oh, well, now let's add this and now let's add that. So by not making it the silver bullet right up front that solves everyone's problem in the entire organization, be able to communicate the clear value and use case clearly and universally aligns everyone to getting to a successful outcome that then allows you to just leverage it over and over and over and replicate it.
Which I guess that was one thread we wanted to pull on. So you stated you had an original obstacle or, need to drive efficiency. And then I heard you both kind of mention that tool then became available and now you've been able to roll out other type of enhancements and or opportunities to scale this interactive object. You want to explain a little bit on that, like peel back the onion, like, so you went for one, just like you just said, get the work done. You just went and did. You did have all of your use cases and your defined benefits. I get it, which takes work. But from there to scale the next set of advancement, did that simplify kind of that? Are you talking about the crawl, walk, run? You were able to unlock some of those capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to AJ's point, listening and hearing the problems and understanding like, wow, we could solve it this way and being able to apply that out. I mean, I think I said it earlier, probably not a week goes by where we don't have someone else in the business say, hey, what do you think about this? And can we solve there? And whether it's talking about storm response, which is relevant to what we're dealing with today, or whether it's talking about material delivery and knowing who's on site when. It has almost become infinite in the amount of directions it can go just by having a good foundation.
So the essence is, and I think it's another core pillar of grid modernization, is if you build the foundation effectively, say, on cinder blocks and not sand, you have ripe opportunity to take that original use case that took a large labor of love to get everyone aligned, and they see the value that really triggers. And I'm not saying maybe this is happening in Southern Company, maybe it's not. I think it's happening across the industry, which is really exciting time we're in, that you can then take that foundation and really the thought leaders and the change champions that have showed that success, and then scale other advanced capabilities throughout the organization. Once you start seeing kind of that domino effect of how it impacts one process, can ultimately lead to many other processes. So I look forward to maybe hearing about your 2026 initiatives and really what have you unlocked moving forward.
Well, I will share just a little peek behind the curtain. We recently executed an enterprise-wide agreement with Veriforce to use throughout the Southern Company organization for contractor credentialing, supply chain, some other things as well. Don't want to reveal too much, but we're currently partnering together to see how this technology can be leveraged for storm restoration or storm response throughout the industry.
So to all you listeners, I think the essence of this conversation is not only did you create a great partnership, but just spelling out, really those simple themes. Like I think another 2026 is really bridging the gap between strategy and execution. So like you said, Chris, just do the work. Shane Powell from Southern Companies said on this podcast, if you don't start today, you won't have a story to say 7 years ago. So, being able to set up that foundation to be able to scale these capabilities, to drive your people adoption, to enhance the processes is all kind of at the core of GridMod. Full situational awareness from the bulk generation to the edge. It's not just all about electron flow. It's really about the process of the people and how that work transforms from a concept to really executing as a whole. And so, this space that we're talking about today was really contract worker compliance, which, probably doesn't get the attention it deserves, but really the ability to streamline authorization, to have the trail and documentation easily accessible, to ensure you're managing your workforce eligibility at a high level to kind of streamline that is powerful. So I love that we were able to share that story today. And so with that, and I know I left with the last nugget to your peers, I like to always kind of share, from being someone that's working in the utility industry now and those next generation workers, what's any sage advice for someone who may be seeking to support our energy industry today? And we'll wrap up this episode. Put you on the spot. Sage advice that maybe your parents gave you or a mentor. Because words matter. I'm giving you more time to think as I keep talking.
I'll be happy to go. I think objects in motion stay in motion. I had someone tell me when I was right out of college, regardless of how bad you don't want to do something or how hard it may be, if you start it, you can get it done. If you think about it and don't start, then you'll think about it forever.
Love it.
And one lady here at Southern Company also said, if you don't disrupt the industry, you will be disrupted. So I thought that was pretty powerful. So basically, be the change agent.
Love it.
Yeah. To that point, I'd just say it is a really exciting time to be in the industry. There is so much change. And if you like challenge, if you like change, if you like dynamic environments, it's a really great time to be here.
Thank you. And I will just say, you said earlier, don't let perfect in the way of the good. I will say I had a similar quote on my cabinet in a cubicle when I was a power system engineer, and my fellow engineer really hated that quote. So I, though, believe, we're in a space where engineers have to adapt to this reality, but we will do it safely, affordably, and reliably. Thank you again for coming to share the story. I look forward to hearing about your next activities. And to everyone listening, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with someone, especially in the field operations, maybe work planning groups, contract management, because I think, understanding you're not alone in this transformational time in this particular area is really helpful to all. So with that, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Liz.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the GridMod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.